My name is Grayson, and welcome to Capstone Podcast. Every episode, we're going to be looking into one of the 11 ASMSA capstones in the form of a student's project. So yeah, let's dive in. Hey Dr. Leigh, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome to Capstone Podcast. So what's your academic background?
So my academic background is mostly in English and literature. So I have an undergraduate degree in English and then a master's degree. It's actually a Master of Liberal Arts. So it's a little more comprehensive. It's literature and philosophy. And then my PhD is in particularly Victorian literature.
Wow, okay. Very nice. And you were working on Gothic fiction right now. So I really like it. And so I think that's a really cool thing to study. And so what do you do at ASMSA?
So here I am English and literature teacher, so I teach composition, I teach sophomore English, and then I also teach Humanities capstone.
Wow. And how long have you been the instructor of the Humanities capstone?
I've actually been the instructor for Humanities capstone in one way or other since it started. So we had firm before capstone, but with the capstones I've been there since it started, so I guess that's about 6-7 years now.
6-7 years. So that kind of leads into my next question. How has Humanities changed throughout the years?
So particularly in terms of like these kinds of projects, we used to have a program that we called FIRM. It was Fundamentals and Research Methods, and it was an outside of the class day experience.
So there's no class period at all?
There's no class period at all. You meet after classes on Wednesday, once a week. And that was your time to talk to your advisor and to do your firm project. So you would take 5 classes on top of doing your firm project. So when we started reconsidering how we thought we could get research better incorporated, one of the big things we were wanting was put it in the class day so that way you have dedicated time to work on it.
Yeah, I don't think I would get that far at all if it was outside of class. Especially, our page minimum is like 15 pages in Humanities, right?
Yeah.
That would not go well for me, at least.
No, I mean, most people don't have time to sit down and turn out, 15, 20 pages in addition to everything else that they're doing.
Yeah. Wow. And, so Humanities has a literature side and then a history side. And in my opinion, I feel like we're kind of like a catch-all capstone. Like, we have a lot of different things we can do that, I don't know. So what are some projects that you didn't realize you could, what are some projects students didn't realize could be done?
I think a lot of them were like really kind of more interesting things, some pop culture projects, so things looking at more contemporary like film or literature. But then also with history, one of the things that Dr. Kauser brings is the potential for doing public history.
Public history.
Public history is like your park rangers and people who are actually out in the public talking to people about history and historical markers and places. And so he's brought a really interesting angle to the class of being able to talk about his own experience with that. And we're hoping at some point we can get some public history projects going too. So
yeah. Has anyone ever done the National Park Hot Springs project?
Not exactly. So we have had, in the past, we had someone who did like digital mapping of Bathhouse Row over the years, which was neat, but not in the way of like doing public history, working in archives, that sort of thing. So that's what we're hoping to move toward. Yeah. It's a goal.
I'll talk to the sophomores and be like, hello.
Yes.
That'd be really neat. And are there any projects that have stuck out to you in recent years?
Yes. So one of my first capstone projects actually was a student who did a study of like fancy dress, and that was really interesting to me because usually people who are studying it through the lens of like women and what costumes they wore, but she was looking at men.
Oh.
She was looking at the way that men in sort of the 19th century would use these as opportunities to kind of go all out. Their fashion is very strict and plain, and so they were able to like reach back to these, opulent French sort of outfits and silk and things like that and get a chance to participate in fashion in a way that they hadn't before. And they would spend a lot of money doing it.
Oh.
Yes. So that was really neat to learn about. And of year did a really awesome project looking at the reimagining of the Southern Gothic in music. And so she used an album by Ethel Cain to look at how the Southern Gothic is affected in that music, but then also how it's sort of transmogrified in some ways. And I learned a lot.
I'm interviewing Alex Ulmer.
Thank you. So excited.
Yeah, so you received First Place Humanities Award for Ethel Cain's 2022 album, Preacher's Daughter. What made you decide to do that project?
Okay, so going into the capstone, I didn't know that it was supposed to be Arkansas focused, which I understand why they did it, because they wanted more people to get published. So I was kind of having a hard time, because I knew I wanted to do literature, and there's not crazy amounts of authors from Arkansas. So I was talking to Dr. Leigh about it, and she was like, you can just do Southern Gothic. Like, it can be more regional instead of super specific. And it was like the night before my like bibliography stuff was due.
Oh my god.
And I was like, dude, I don't know what I'm gonna do. So I was scrolling through the old archive of everybody else's work, and there was somebody who did their project on an album analysis of the Welcome to the Black Parade, My Chemical Romance. And I was like, oh, I know an album that is Southern Gothic and that I really, really love. So I was like, yeah, I can just do Preacher's Daughter.
That's like amazing. Oh my gosh. So like, and you're it's a little unconventional. It's like an album. So like, how did your instructors react? Like Dr. Leigh and Kowser?
Dr. Leigh was like super interested in it. She's like, no, I've never heard of this before, but it sounds really interesting, and like, just go ahead with it.
Wow. Okay, Liz. Yeah. So Humanities is kind of awesome.
Yeah, pretty open.
Yeah. So and then your paper, it's normally like 20 pages limit, and yours was 21. Of course, like any ASMSA student on campus can read the project in the Omeka archives. But for those unable to read it, what is an overview of your project?
Okay, so Preacher's Daughter by Ethel Cain is a concept album. So the character of Ethel Cain is like about a girl who it starts off in her hometown and how she's upset and feels limited by her like birth and the fact that like she can't leave. So she tries to leave and she ends up escaping and meets like 3 different men who kind of screw her over, and it's just like a coming to terms with like life and like family and her relationship with God. And so it's I think it's very like impactful to a lot of people as like we're in the South, you know? It's like a real story.
Because wasn't part of it like there's rumors that like she started the fire which like killed her dad?
Yeah, it's very like drama, because that's one thing of Southern Gothic. So my whole paper is, since it's a relatively new album, there isn't a lot about it, and a lot of people don't know about Southern Gothic. So my goal was to just be like, this is a work of Southern Gothic fiction, and it's more modern, because Southern Gothic really had its heyday in like post-Civil War, like antebellum period, and then with Flannery O'Connor, like kind of like the 50s. So it's a more modern work of Southern Gothic fiction, but I wanted to prove that it still is one.
Ooh, okay.
So yeah.
Cool. And then so like I've read your paper and I've seen your presentation.
Yes.
Was it really hard condensing all those pages into a 10-minute presentation for symposium?
Yeah, it was really awful actually, because my paper's long and I go by song order. And there's 13 songs. So, and I had to try and take that down to a 10-minute presentation. Yeah. And I was workshopping it with another student who's also in my Humanities capstone. And I think my original runtime for my presentation was like 17 minutes.
17 minutes.
It was really bad. I was like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to do this. So my presentation is a really cut down version, because I didn't have time to go over everything as much as I would have liked.
Yeah. So
that's why I always encourage people to read my paper instead of like having me explain it to them like in my presentation form.
That makes sense. Is there something that you really wish you would have like put in there that you left out kind of, or like regrets, I guess?
I guess just the one thing that bugged me the most is I didn't have time to like really explain the plot of it.
Ooh.
So if you didn't know what was happening, you were kind of lost in my presentation, which bugged me a little, but it's okay.
Yeah, and then so like I, read your paper. I looked at the sources, and I'm seeing names like Genius, like
Yeah.
Rolling Stone, W Magazine.
Mhm.
So like, how did it go about like finding like scholarly sources for like music stuff? Like,
Mhm.
how
Well,
does that
okay.
work?
Since it's a pretty new album, because I call my project like a lyrical interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not so much focused on like the music theory
Yeah.
aspect of it.
That's true.
So I just like had to find other sources. Like I used a lot of interviews from Hayden and Hedonia, who's the real person behind the project.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of interviews from her. Genius was for the lyrics, so I could like have them accurately cited. And then so most of my scholarly sources were from stuff about Southern Gothic and Southern Gothic like womanhood. So most of the like stuff that is about the album and like the story behind it and the creator's like interpretations and like intentions for it are like interviews.
And then my next question was about like, so you got sources about Southern Gothic and stuff, and one of those people was somewhere around Arkansas, and then you're getting judged at symposium, and that person who you sourced was one of your judges.
Yes.
How, like, what were your thoughts? Like, what was going through your mind?
Yeah, so when I turned in my original like annotated bibliography, I had a source about Southern Gothic womanhood from Peggy Dunn Bailey, who I think is at Harding. And she was a mentor of Dr. Leigh's. I didn't know this. And Dr. Leigh was like, oh yeah, this is cool. And I was like, ah! Because I was just like worried about misinterpreting what she had said in my own work and her being like, that's not right. But I'm sure that's just like a worry, it's not really super rational.
Yeah, like it's not gonna happen.
And then when we came around to judging time, because Dr. Cowsert had picked somebody that he had worked with from West Virginia, and I was like, oh, Dr. Leigh, who are you picking for it? And she's like, I think you know. And I was like, ah! So it's just really, I was like kind of panicking a little bit just because she would see her own work that she's put a lot into interpreted and put into something else by like a high school student.
Yeah.
And I was like, I hope I really didn't mess this up. But I think it went well.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, you got first place Humanities
Yeah.
award. I'd say it went well. But yeah, it's like small world, I guess.
I know.
And then, so just like last question, if you had to choose your capstone again, would you choose Humanities?
Oh, yeah. No,
100%.
Definitely. I had a great time. I know some people felt frustrated by the Arkansas limit that was put upon them, even though I think everybody did really great projects.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was super fun because I love the album so much and I love the story and I love Southern Gothic, so it was just like everything that hit like right in my interest, and I was like, oh, this is great.
So what are some awards that people in the Humanities capstone can win?
So we have a lot of categories. With Humanities capstone, you'll be on the side where you would be in like literature or history. So depending on the number of participants, the number of groups that we have, categories that we'll make, you can win first, second, or third place in your category. And then you'll be competing for the potential of overall winner as well. So you've got that possibility.
Yeah, and the overall winner, are you saying overall Humanities or overall arts and history?
So it would be humanities. Essentially what we have is a division between all the other humanities fields and then like visual arts and performing arts. So if you're not a visual art or performing art person, then you could be competing for the other side, right, for the overall.
Yeah, and then there's also presentation awards.
Yes, we've started doing those now, so that's been good. We now are doing kind of top presentation and things like that. I like that we're evolving.
Yeah.
As we start to realize that there are so many different areas and categories that people can show their research in different ways, we want to offer awards for that. So we're always trying to find ways to really recognize those students.
Okay, y'all. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.